That's
Let me see you run. Your mics are on. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It is 5:30 p.m. and we have a work session upon us. Clerk, could you please help me with the roll call?
Dennis Deckham,
Yeah.
Devereaux,
Here.
Green,
Present.
Lewis,
Present.
McKinney,
Here.
Robinson here, Schwartz,
Here.
Everyone's here. I'd like to move to item 3, the adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion?
move the agenda as presented.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is adopted. Moving over to citizen participation. If you would like to make a comment, please make it to the items on the agenda and please limit your time to 3 minutes if you're interested in joining us up here. Or reading the speaker.
In the audience.
Yeah. Okay, seeing no citizen participation at this time, I'd like to go ahead and close that and move forward to our discussion. Under tab 1, we have a revised personnel manual, job analysis for township roles of financial oversight, and a discussion regarding criteria for evaluating whether to extend or retire FRE employees. seeing that it's difficult to have conversations that are in depth when we are not in a quorum. But that at our last board meeting, there was an emphasis on conducting a work session and to be a productive way to openly and not extraordinarily formally evaluating our ideas and how we're feeling about some of these different items. So please share your thoughts. Let's collaborate. Let's brainstorm together. And I'd love to start with item A, the personal manual. And I would like to open up the discussion to see if there are any initial comments or questions or a general feel for what Ms. Devereaux created and we work together on. I think that, sorry, Ms. McKinney?
I would like to hear us, some of the changes we made in.
Yeah, sure thing. So I believe that I sent over a list of changes. So that's going to be on page 33 of 36 in your work session packet. So there were a lot of changes that we went through and made. I did not redline them because they were so extensive. So one of I would say the biggest reason for wanting to rework the personnel manual was because there were quite a few sections that were either in conflict with one another or they were repetitive. So you had things about benefits, for instance, in 3 different places. So if you needed to have a comprehensive overview of your benefits, whether it was as a new hire or as someone who was retiring from township employment, the information was scattered throughout the manual. There were also quite a few spots where the current policies were not in line with best practices for both HR, but also some changes to Michigan employment law. And there were also sections where there weren't great protections for certain classes of employees. So for instance, we didn't have a veterans clause about how we would go about employing and re-employing veterans after an additional round of service in the military. And it seemed that was something that Supervisor Davishak and I talked about, wanting to make sure that that was clear, that protections for various classes of employees were outlined properly. A couple of other things in here. So performance and discipline transparency. There were sections that talked about performance and how performance would be evaluated and managed, but it was pretty subjective in the way that the wording was outlined. So we wanted to make sure that it was really clear what employees could expect when it came to their performance evaluation. Excuse me. And then also there was quite a bit of, honestly, in my opinion, just kind of condescending language around workplace conduct in particular, like being exceptionally explicit about when you were allowed to take your breaks and the very detailed process for how to approve that with your direct supervisor. It was just there were sections of the manual that felt like we weren't employing adults, to be quite fair, and I thought that needed to be edited for respectful language.
This is the working sentence, so that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
When the employee manual was done last year or sometime, we paid how much for it? Do you recall?
Well, when you initially hired the firm, they got up to like $18,000 and we terminated. And then Bernie, Linky, and Lynette kind of took it from there. And we would pay them.
Also did cost up.
No, it cost us money. For the lawyer that we had hired, we were dissatisfied.
Oh, you were dissatisfied?
And I believe a lot of it too was that he was taking a very long time to get anything done.
It's part
And, yeah, that was, you know, and then every time, of course, I'm doing that was something, there was more money being paid out.
To echo what trustee Devereaux shared. Very early on, when I came to this position, it was clear to me that there were serious flaws in the manual, and that it was redundant, and that it seemed to not take into consideration discipline, performance, and left way too much to discretion in a way that made me feel uncomfortable in handling issues that may arise within the township. And two, the spirit of it did feel a little bit condescending, a little bit unnecessarily wordy, and there were many implications and sometimes contradictory statements throughout the document and things that were just simply not in line with, state and federal law.
Well, did we do anything like, what I noticed is that as far as like, how can I put this? When an employee feels they should get an increase, like right now, it's like if anybody feels they have an increase, they, take it to the board.
Right.
But do we have a procedure for that to not have that? Because if everyone feels they need a raise, naturally, the next employee feels they need a raise. Do we have a procedure for that now? Is there something like that in place that
Well, can I say one thing to answer that? The original personnel manual had a clause in there saying there was no merit raises here. So it really wasn't an issue. People didn't think they could come and get a raise. So if you're going to go to where people are entitled to a merit raise for their performance outside of the budget, then you should have some sort of description on how that person would go forward.
I think we should have something like that because we can't have something like every other month someone coming in front of the board saying, I feel I need a raise. We need to have a procedure for that. Because that's not how it's normally handled in the workplace. Because every employee feels they need a raise. Every employee feels they're overworked. And we need a procedure the way that should be handled.
I'm looking through right now. I know I wrote something about compensation, but I can't remember if we actually ended up including it here or if we held it because we weren't sure how we wanted to approach that. Sorry.
You guys understand what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Where I'm coming from?
Yes.
You did it.
Yes, you did. It was comprehensive benefits section 4.1. Salary adjustments may be based on the performance evaluation. I actually made a note. As to what performance evaluation. If there would be standardized across the department. That's page 11 of 36.
Because what's happening now, and I'm glad you mentioned that, is that it's like becoming overwhelming. We don't have we're not budgeting increases. We're just saying, okay, yeah, we'll give you a raise. The room is packed with people, so we look like the bad guy because we're not handing out raises. And is it in the budget? Do we have the money to do it? And I just don't want us to have to go through that anymore. I really don't.
When Ms. Devereaux and I were doing some initial planning and put all of the backup documents into this manual, but we did think that it would make sense for our expert over here to help us create a form that would standardize what the performance, survey would be for the employee.
Yeah,
I think
so
very straightforward.
we have an overall process for performance evaluations in section 7.2. It's on page 24. 24 of 36, yes, ma'am. And then as trustee Green reminded me, thank you so much. That section 4.1 is where we have salary and pay increases. But if we have things that we want, this is really straightforward and simple, and something that the supervisor and I drafted several months ago at this point. So if we have additional things that we want to call out and be more explicit around related to salary and pay increases, we can certainly add that in.
How do the rest of you guys feel about that? I just want us to be fair to each and every employee.
I think, Brenda, you make a good point about employees and others who come directly to the board without any preliminary process to bring them to this. I think that if somebody thinks that they're worth it, they need to set out a memo, they need to provide evidence that they are, could use more money, or use more money, that they deserve more money. So that we're able to show the taxpayers that we're paying these people X amount of dollars, and here's the service you're gonna get because of that. So I think
Right,
it just can't come to the board out of the blue. It needs to be a procedure where
right.
there's a recommendation coming from maybe three, or as to what is an appropriate response to that request.
Because that's what it seems like is happening.
Ms. Devereaux?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, in addition to that, I do think that we need to make sure that whatever justification people are being asked to provide, that we're making it easy for them to also have benchmarks for what's appropriate to municipalities, of our size in Southeast Michigan, so that it's not just you have to make a case and go figure it out yourself, but we have a way of helping employees, and also like for there to be some manager accountability around taking the lead on ensuring that our pay rates are fair, to local market benchmarks.
And at a regular cadence so that certain employees are not overlooked. Mr. Green?
Yeah, I agree with a lot of points that are being made here. There obviously need to be a standard others in the process. I think one thing in relation to this, and I'm not going to move away from the agenda, just trying to think about how this document, if and when it's adopted, is put into practice, because we also adopted at a previous meeting the establishing HR. We took out the managerial language.
Right.
But establishing a committee to draft a description about what a HR position would look like, that to me would be a key position in managing that process moving forward, because that person would strictly be responsible for the human resources management of the township, and you have an independent body, which would help standardize that procedure moving forward. So that's just something that I want us to keep in mind. We're kind of looking through the document.
I also think that's a really good point, Dana, around how we want to move forward with this. And if we do end up passing a version of the personnel manual, and let's say that we do bring in somebody to do HR work, 3-4 months from now, that person's going to have input too into what they want to see. So just something to keep in mind, that is something that we're exploring, and the two things are codependent in some ways.
I would like to point out one thing, is that statute gives the supervisor the authority over personnel policy.
Yep.
Subject to working with the board on things like that. So, I think that until you hire somebody to do that work, it should be the supervisor's responsibility to kind of figure it all out. And then if you get a HR person, that can be delegated to that HR person. But if you have to have a point person to start with or to do something with, when we don't have an HR person, it should be the same.
Speaking of officials, so one of the things that jumped out to me right away when I started reviewing this was the personnel. So it's very first page 5, purpose and scope. This person I'm going to apply to all non-union employees with superior charge township. It does not apply to elected officials or their appointed deputies. So my question is how, or if anything, like what governs the deputies and or elected officials?
Yeah, that I don't know.
The board,
The board. It was legally what we did.
Okay.
And that's, I think, consistent with how things were handled previously. And
So-
in addition to that, there are different laws that govern the hiring of deputies and, the operations of officials.
Well, yeah, I'm not sorry. So I'm not speaking specifically to like the hiring practices, because officials have the ability to hire their own deputies. That's their desire. I I guess my question is like the stuff like around harassment or sexual harassment or et cetera, like what document like governs that type of behavior, or because they would be interacting with everybody else in the workplace. So
I believe that although they're a deputy or elected official, those behaviors still apply to them. It's just that I think this is just with respect to the hiring and or how a person gets into the office itself, with respect to 1.1.
There are sections though, in the manual that are more about conduct, and not about process, for what that would be different for an elected official versus a regular employee. So I think the thing that I would be curious about, and I'll throw in here that, this definitely should be reviewed by an HR, or personnel lawyer. And ideally somebody who's done that for municipalities. My intention with pulling this together was to save you another 18 grand, not
Appreciate that.
not to propose this as a final document, but just to get it as good as I could so that you could then give it to a professional, like somebody who does this on a day-to-day basis. But that would be a question that I'd be very curious to ask a personnel lawyer, is whether or not some of these policies should be applied to elected officials and deputies. And if so, does that stay within a document like this, or do you keep it clean? And do you have a separate document that applies to elected officials?
But here's the problem. You get an elected official, that person does something wrong. What can you do? You can't fire them. You can't discipline them. You can't take their pay away. So it's like
You can do a sue them. That's it.
Well,
you can't do that.
Or they can recall.
The recall would work against them. Also, the deputies are considered an extension of the office.
Yeah.
Not an extension, they are not they're a special category of employees who are essentially quasi clerks, quasi supervisors, quasi treasurers. And so they have the office to be integrated as a whole. Those two need to be together.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's this far beyond my expertise.
But I don't think it's a problem as it is.
But they still have to adhere to certain conduct though as well. Oh, all right, okay.
The problem is this, if they don't adhere to the conduct, what are you gonna do about it? If that person resists, what can you really do? You can't fine them. You can't say you're laid off for a month or you can't do anything. Yeah.
right, I recognize. If that wrong, are you?
Oh, go ahead. I wonder if that's just worth writing down. Like, if what is just so that we have an understanding of if we are not able to do certain things when it comes to elected officials and deputies, and what we are able to do, like what the recourse is if there's something truly just outrageous that happens. It might just be worth being clear in
I would agree that.
Isn't there something in the MTA manual that we already have referring to elected officials and deputies?
So if an official engaging in some sort of bad behavior, if it violates state or federal law, then you have a remedy. But if it's not state or federal law, they're just jerks or whatever. It may not be able, you can't do anything to them because it's useless to have a policy that you can't enforce. Like have a zoning ordinance, but we can't enforce it. Please obey it. We can't enforce it. And that's kind of the reason why this is set off to the side.
Sure. So I mean, to Trustee Devereaux's point, I think that's something that's worth writing down. I would also just say that there should be some type of documentation as it pertains to officials' behavior. If there isn't a remedy that can be, utilized from an employee point of view, right? So if an employee just let's say has an issue with the clerk, and there's nothing you can do about it, the clerk is just being a jerk. There should be some documentation regarding that. I understand, the law and MTA guidelines as well. I'm going to be honest, that makes me a bit uncomfortable, to be frank.
But the law is a law. I do think there should be something outlined here as far as like a documentary procedure. So that employees at least feel like they have something they can go to document the behavior and then have it recorded in some form or fashion.
Could we say something like, refer to, for elected officials, refer to the MTA laws?
Or like, maybe like, the state component office, MCO, X, Y, and Z, and there are remedies that are cited when things are serious.
Is that what you're referring to, something like that?
Yeah, I would refer to the law and to the MTA guidelines. But I think like internally there needs to be a reporting procedure established because even though there isn't something that we can, so for example, if like an employee wants to make the board aware of something, like my understanding is that if there's an issue with an official that would, or employee that would move to closed session, but there at least should be an avenue for that employee to make the rest of the board aware.
Absolutely. And that would be brought to the board.
Right.
Absolutely.
And then you could check with the MTA guidelines, because they do have lawyers, that specialize in different areas. Check with them.
Because we don't want an employee to feel like, they can't, if something is happening to them by an official, they can't come to the board. We don't want them to feel. Because if they're being mistreated in some kind of way, the board needs to know. That's what.
I agree.
And Deborah, like, again, I really appreciate you taking the time and effort in partnership with the supervisor to rework. So I do wonder, I mean, in addition to this being reviewed by an independent party or an HR person, if and when we bring that person in, what is at any point do we expect this to go to the department heads for their review and feedback regarding, because I know there are certain departments that have specific or differentiations in duties, right? So, I mean, the fire department would be included in this because they're unionized, but the utility department, for example, is non-union, but they have a difference to like the working hours that they operate and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, there is some language around the utility department here. I just wonder if the department heads to have the opportunity to comment on it before it comes to.
So aren't all the departments in the same hours now? It used to be.
Utilities is
8:30 to
different.
5,
Utilities is
Yeah,
and then that changed from 8:30 to 5.
Utilities hours are different.
They've always been 40 hours.
Why have we?
It's close, but it's different.
So were those the main areas that you changed?
Yeah, I mean, and there were things like, just as another example, the bereavement leave policy was like kind of cold. It was very like, it covered very few people that, would have been important to you in your life. The bereavement policy was really harsh. And so I made some suggestions around making that a bit more compassionate. So there's just a few things in here where it's like, this is not consistent with what I saw in some other, municipalities as examples, but just HR generally, some of the policies were just quite, outdated.
Ms.
And
Mason,
that's on page 20.
did you want to come and share something? Just.
Under the sick time, the new law just went in effect in February, so that needs to be reworked.
Oh, great. Thank
We
you.
don't meet the criteria for outdoors and the first year.
Okay.
I can get that information to you.
What about, let's say I'm going to use a good example. You guys help me out. Let's say, okay, right now we're able to offer the employees certain things. Okay, we're able to give the reimbursement for this, reimbursements for that. Right now, those things are like in stone, How are we going to handle it if something comes up and we can't do these things? I mean, because like right now, the way the economy is going, things are really crazy right now. And so it might come a time we might say, we're able to offer you these things now. We were able to do this for the past 2 years, but our situation in the township is different. Do we have something in our manual to direct us with those kind of decisions if we have to make it.
Are you referring to something like the, like bonuses?
Yeah, I mean, we gotta have something because we can't always, we're not gonna always be able to do that. And then we might be, we need something in our manual.
So I look at these are not vested rights. These are contingent rights.
Okay.
And everything is contingent on the township being able to pay for it through taxation, right?
Okay.
And if we get to the point now, we do have this clause in our contract with firefighters that if medical insurance gets so huge down there, then we have to renegotiate. And if we can't renegotiate, then the board can make a decision to put more of the cost of health insurance on firefighters. But we have to justify that it is because of severe financial constraints that we must do that. So I think that all this is contingent upon the proper ability of everything working together
Okay,
and having enough revenue to make.
like health insurance.
Well, like if things got really tight, health insurance, yeah, I mean, because we created the wellness bonus that could be taken away. That's no vested right there. Education bonus, longevity, all those are really subject to the continuing operation of the township. Proper, efficient operation of the township's financial.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be part of this document.
I mean,
So-
with that being said, I think to Ken's, I'm sorry.
No, go for it, go for it.
But to build on, what Ken said, I think it would be contingent on this board providing reasonable time, notice and justification as to why those cuts are being made. So for example, when we're doing our budget review, which I actually think we should be preparing for the next budget. Not, but that's kind of just for the
Yeah.
I'm working on it.
but so, and when we're looking at those things and we're kind of walking through step by step, like giving the staff and the department head enough reasonable notice, like, hey, it's likely that we will be cutting X, and then providing a justification for it. Now, that's not something that we're obligated to do, and that's something that we should do. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah,
And
and it does say, sorry, just the first one here. Yeah, 5. It does say in the purpose and scope that this manual is intended to be informational and is not an employee contract. It also says that the board, the township board, is responsible for providing reasonable prior notice of changes or modifications to this manual to any affected employees. So if we want to be more explicit around that, we certainly could. But my intention in that initial paragraph was to make it clear, like, these are intentions. Any existing employment contracts would technically supersede anything that's in here. Now, ideally, you would want your employment contracts to be reviewed and modified so that they are as close as humanly possible, so that folks aren't confused.
Okay. It was really well said, so.
what countries are we talking contingent?
If you have any, like, I know that there are some with, I think there's some in utilities.
We all have,
I think there's some in utilities. Aren't there?
no, they're all.
Oh, okay, okay.
Well, unless they're on the fire department, then they have a collective bargaining.
Great. If you ever have one, it's in there.
So, but speaking to, going back to the point where trustee Schwartz mentioned and to trustee McKinney's point, if there is a contingency clause, would it go in that introductory paragraph?
Yeah, I think it should. I think it should. If you want to be more explicit about in cases of financial hardship, there may be, like, we could certainly put a something more explicit in that introduction.
So you can look at the firefighters collective bargaining agreement, there's clause in there.
Yeah.
You can use that maybe as a model.
Okay.
And you spend all that money to this, and we're going to again, making it smooth. But
Well, we're not spending it again.
Good.
So, get to do it twice, so have fun.
So I think I've noted that it's already 6 o'clock. Wow, time flies when you're having fun. So,
Should we move on?
well, yeah, I don't know if we want to. We got 2 other big.
Yeah.
So,
we're going to the next one.
From an action item standpoint, so I took some notes, and there's not a whole lot of changes. So I think you and I can put some more modifications in here. But again, just very strong recommendation. Get a personnel lawyer to look at this just to make sure, because I am certainly not a legal
It's better than what we had.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, to see input from the department head.
Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you for that.
Yes.
So Sarah and I will.
Yeah.
Look at the comments, I got
Yeah.
taking notes as well.
Yes.
Fred Lucas did take a look at this, he has some comments based on his general expertise, and then we can also run it through the labor attorney or HR.
Labor attorney, that's what I was looking for. Thank you.
And
Yes.
I will go to, I can do some searching, but I can go to MCA to
Yeah.
the recommendations for someone just going to be conservative and their parts of us.
It's a fun, real cheap.
I guess I like.
Frugal.
Anyhow, all right, if you all are ready, can we move ahead to the job analysis for township roles of financial oversight?
Will you give a page, please?
It is,
34.
Thank
I
you.
have it, on page 34. Jared, mind if I take it to you?
Oh, sure. So, one of the things that, we talked about, at a couple of different meetings, was the need to understand, what all of our roles within the township that have any sort of financial oversight. So this might be, at the, in the office. So Ms. Mason's role, for example, it might be, within the utility department. We've got Leah, working the billing specialist. We have a temp doing billing specialist work. We had, Mr. Lockheed, our controller, and we don't really have a overarching understanding of what all of these roles are responsible for, what they are accountable for, and also, what the required skills, the current skills, the skill gaps, might look like. And as a result, it makes it incredibly difficult to benchmark compensation in particular, and to ensure that we have an understanding of what roles are fulfilling what duties and which roles we may need to add into the township or modify in order to meet all of our needs. So I just wrote up a very, again, sort of simple process that you could hire someone to follow in order to do a job analysis so that we understand all of those things and we can clean up this feels like the section of employment at the township that is most murky and needs some cleanup. And by not cleaning it up, we're suffering in a few areas right now.
I agree.
In terms of in-scope roles, does the board feel like anything is missing there?
That's the bulleted list on page 34.
You have down accountant. Can you explain what area?
Yeah, I was unclear whether we had an accountant, so I just put that in there.
So, right, so currently, so utility billing specialist, and there's two billing specialists.
Right.
Or right now, one is vacant, being filled by temp. So there's utility billing specialist and residential liaison, and utility billing specialist slash accountant.
Maybe that's what I'm saying.
I believe that's.
Yeah.
For the utilities department.
Right now, do we have an understanding as far as the utility department, what the accountant responsibilities, accounting, because they don't reconcile the bank statements. That's done by the treasurer's office. By law, the treasurer has to reconcile all bank statements. So what other accounting is being done in the utilities company? I would like to see that listed out because it has not been done for us.
Not very clear.
Not clearly anyway. Because the only accounting, and a lot of it is data input. You have the billing specialist, the utility building specialist. I would like to see what are the functions of the accounting person in utilities. The treasurer reconcile bank statements. What else is there left to do? Good question.
I've been told they're reporting for the daily, monthly, quarterlies for the department, and that's something that Mr. Lucky was doing. That Elliot has taken on.
And Aaliyah's doing that now, so it's basically reporting.
It's a letter, it's daily, monthly, quarter, report. Which way, Ms. Mason probably about the sense of it. Thank you for letting me put it on the slide.
No, right now, with the Athens of Mr. Rocky, we are trying to get utility on the BSNA.
Oh,
Are they still on fund balance?
No, they're in QuickBooks still.
Oh, quick
Yeah.
one.
And
Okay.
it's just not feasible because they have their utility billing and BSNA and everything else, is QuickBooks and moving and back and forth.
Because if they were in BSNA,
Life would be a lot better.
their work would be done just like yours in the treasurer's office.
Yes,
And as soon as you enter that data, the accounting is being done automatically. Right.
yeah, well, then it's
If they were,
the
if
whole
they were,
township, yeah, would be in it, like when I do 1099s, all be in one group, things would move.
right, because
smoothly.
if they were in BSNA, utility would be able to talk to you, interact with the treasurers if necessary.
Yeah, I believe that's Mary's goal, is we've been looking into it, trying to get it moved.
Yes,
Okay, because right now, if a person wanted to pay their water bill, they can pay it in the treasurer's office.
Mhm.
That's been done years ago. So then they can talk to utilities, can pull that data from the.
Yeah, we don't use BSNA to
Right,
its
I know.
capabilities.
Right, but I'm saying if they did, they can pull that data from the treasury.
It'll be in one,
Exactly.
so we're working on it.
BSNA is the issue. We need to get utilities into BSNA.
Well, that was my understanding that they were.
Yeah, we're
yeah,
working on it.
we met, we talked about all of that when we met with the Woodhill group.
Right,
They came out, they actually came out and met with the different departments.
and it was hard to get that done.
We just had a little. Somebody just didn't want to move it. Let's just put it, leave it at that.
Right,
And
right.
it's two sets of books and it's just a lot and, yep, so.
Well, I'm glad to see that's happening.
We're trying, it's just a little, takes a little time.
Right.
Yeah,
I know
that would
it's
be,
not done yet, so we're trying to get that done before trying to get the move done, so they can finish the year on
Yeah.
QuickBooks
And that
2024.
might even save us money, you guys. We might not need that position.
Well, QuickBooks though, we pay that a monthly fee, so that'd be gone, that would be gone.
Right,
yeah, if the whole township would get on it, treasurer,
Cloud.
no,
Right,
no,
not
no,
cloud.
the cloud is expensive.
Because
Yeah,
you're
just
on
regular BSNA would be ideal.
Correct.
because we've been on BSNA for years. It's utility.
Treasurers is on BSNA too,
Oh,
or
we
the whole thing, yeah, for assessing and,
QuickBooks, but, yeah.
Treasurer's been in BSNA.
okay,
Treasurer's been in BSNA for over
so the
20 years.
beginning. Okay,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Nancy. Good job.
So I'm sorry, as it pertains to this, job analysis, do we have like a timeline on how long we would expect this to take?
That's for us to figure out as a group and decide who we want to handle it. And how we want to pursue the group or individual.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it depends on who we bring in to do it, like how fast we can find someone, and what their capacity looks like. I can do it, but I will be honest that I feel uncomfortable doing it.
And what part are you talking?
What's that? I could do the job analysis. Like I do this for clients all the time. But given I have decision-making power, like as part of this board, I don't feel comfortable.
It's just the appearance.
Yeah, well,
Any way they
yeah.
want.
I don't
We're
I don't feel good about it. I'm happy to recommend someone, and if we have if we want to do some interviews or anything, but I don't know, I thought about it because I could do it, but I do feel uncomfortable about doing it.
I think we have enough resources. I think Emily, you could contact our auditor, contact MTA, the resources are available.
Yeah.
As far as who we can use to get that.
That's it, you know, actually, that's a, sorry.
No, we can do the deep dive into this.
It'll save us money.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, so the thing that I was thinking is that just what you just said, Brenda, sparked an idea is we do have other townships in the area that do have HR resources. And I wonder if we could talk to them about some sort of reciprocal agreement. This really, given the number of roles you're evaluating, this really shouldn't take somebody very long. You should be able to get this done inside a week, as long as you can get the proper interviews done quickly.
You can call Washington County, their HR person, they have several people.
That would be
great
great.
with our general liability insurance and access to HR associated with other resources. And so we can reach out to them. I mean, I know that we've been working with Pittsfield quite a bit. on
I
items
think
like that.
I don't have a problem with you reaching out us, Emily. I mean, there's a lot of resources out there. I mean, you're the supervisor.
I think as long as somebody inside of our township doesn't do it. Like, I think that having someone outside of the township
Right.
is a great idea, and if we can get it done cheaply by partnering with a different township or Washtenaw County, that sounds great.
Yeah.
We're already
Yes, I
paying
agree.
we're already paying her
And I'll
salary.
just project manage it.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Washington County first.
Yeah, I agree. As long as the board is the one doing it, they're an independent party.
Right. Right.
We're already paying you the same.
Let's see it up.
And that do it.
All right.
So we'll use this as a guideline and we'll work on getting something together by our next board meeting with an outside party. I'll just project manage it.
That sounds great. And they may have a process for doing this. Again, intention was just as a conversation starter for us, like, does this level of detail meet our needs? And that'll be a good benchmark for whoever you bring in.
We would probably have to bring it to the board for a regular meeting because we really can't make a decision on how we're going to do it.
Right.
This is just a discussion. So that's go on the agenda,
Just a reminder.
Unless it's.
just a reminder. So
Right. Do we have to bring it to, just a process question, do we have to bring it to a regular meeting to decide that we're going to investigate it?
I don't think so.
Or we can decide that we're going to
Decision.
investigate it?
we can't make any decisions
You know what?
today.
I think we should, because we're the microscope. Everything we do.
So then can we?
So I think everything we do, we should bring it to the board because we're damned if we do, and we're damned if we don't. So let's just do it.
Well, we're having
We're
this meeting.
supposed to, because this is just a discussion.
Sure.
We can't make any decisions.
We're having a board meeting in an hour. Can we walk it on?
I mean, we want to bring this to the board.
It should be walking.
I don't want to wait another month just to make the decision that we can look into it.
Yeah.
So,
We're walking over.
great.
Can we bring it to tonight's board meeting?
That's what we're doing. Yeah.
Go ahead and just do that under the statute. But if we're gonna make decisions, then that is brought to the board, it's good money. But as far as employment issues, the supervisor can go ahead and within her own authority, contact people who could describe these roles that you're listing.
I recognize that as part of her authority. I think to trustee McKinney's point, we just want to make sure that we're on board. So let's just bring it to we just bring it to the body for a vote.
Great.
But what are we bringing to the board?
Let's just do it.
But what are we bringing? What is the
What we're
issue?
gonna bring, I guess, bring to the board that we're having Emily do the research on this, is that what?
Correct.
Oh, that's fine.
Right, because if we don't, someone's gonna find something wrong with it.
And process wise, how do we walk that on? Do we do that under new business?
Again, and we asked.
Great. Okay, I just want to make sure that we move quick, we get past the agenda item and then we don't do it.
Right, yeah, so
Sorry.
we get to, like, do we accept the agenda? We just, somebody say, well, like to make a motion.
Just make a motion.
Excellent.
Okay, so what should the
All right,
motion, you gonna make the motion?
Here.
So what should the motion be? Right here.
Okay, I'll do it.
You gonna make a motion?
Okay, let's move on to the procedure.
Great. No.
Let's, roll center, let's do the main meeting and item C, criteria for evaluating Well, I really want to give you a sense of things. And two, want to have our clerk share an update on where we are with our data and perhaps saying, see those notes.
Sorry, quick question. I just got back this morning, so I apologize if I missed it. I don't have, okay,
There's nothing in there. No.
okay, got it. Sorry, thank you.
I just spoke to the auditors today, and they are finalizing the audit, and I should have the numbers. They're giving it to Ken Polka by Thursday. And assuming next week with holiday, they said it's kind of a wash. I should have numbers in 2 weeks. Or 2024.
I would suggest that we think about extending it until June 30th, and then you got the first half year of expenditures. And they use that as a basis for your budgeting. Then you can use that to see where were we with salaries and the other issues you want to look at, then we can make a decision. I think it's been a hardship not to hire, to be honest, because we do need it to be here. But we had a financial emergency in the beginning of this year. I don't think we should forget about that. You know, and until we pardon me.
We don't know that we don't.
Well, right. So
According to the books, we're okay for this year, but like I said, we don't have beginning fund balance because it won't move because of the until it's
Right.
closed. So our books, our numbers are not right.
the fund balance would be significantly reduced.
Exactly.
Well, Nancy, you know, from the years you've been here, we've always had a year of reserve. We was always in our reserve, we was able to operate the township with everything fair in the township, but we never brought in another dollar. We were always able to, we had money to operate. Always had it like that, ever since you've been here. And I would like to see us there again. I would like to see us again there. And I just want to say to the new board members, we had it to the point where everyone can get served. I mean, I said get paid. We could still serve the community, do the things we had to do in the community if we never brought in another dollar. I would like to see us at that point again.
But I would just say too, we're doing really good on our interest. Just between March 1st and Friday, we actually earned $26,000 in interest. And that's only on 7 of our accounts. So we've earned that much interest just since March 1st.
Yeah, that's because the stock markets are playing games. So when
Absolutely.
they're done playing games, it's not going back down. Playing games.
So,
Right.
so given that, the book's gonna be closed essentially to the, right?
So they have to be to the state, right?
Yeah,
It's
right,
already done.
yeah, so, sorry, I'm just trying to get my mind right.
Get it right.
I hear,
Right.
but I hear the point around the reserves.
Mhm.
And it's apparent to me that, I mean, even with the books not being complete, it's apparent to me that there is there's significantly less compared to previous years, right? So at least the part of previous year. I think, and this isn't speaking to like if we should or should not eliminate the higher fee. This speaks more to like a general concern I have about reviewing the numbers in the budget. But that I cannot speak to what the deficit is exactly because I don't have the numbers.
Right.
And so I'm so as far as like how we've operated the first half of this year, right? And this is just me speaking to like lessons learned, like future operations.
Right.
It's been difficult for me to assess because the numbers are not up to date.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
From my perspective, over the past 6 months, in our budget where there have been line items for special projects across the township, I have not spent on it. And I have not brought any of those items to the board, whether it's, you know, additional paths or signage or refurbishing the buildings. I have only been encouraging spending on the necessary and looking for ways that we can move funds around to meet the bare minimum of what's urgent for our community. And what's been difficult for me too is that sometimes it seems that there were gaps in communication
with in particular our engineers who are managing a variety of ramp compliance projects.
Engineers being OHM.
I'm sorry?
Engineers being OHM.
OHM, yeah. Yep, OHM. And something that I've been focusing on too is how we can sometimes delay and spread our costs for some of these projects that we're implementing. Rather than hit it so hard upfront, but thinking about what we can push into 2026 and still hold on to some of our grant money because we are still incredibly strapped right now. But the items that you see before you on our past agendas, our current agenda, from my perspective, everything has been revenue neutral for help with the budget, and it's stuff that's like absolutely necessary, around tech, around, emergency mitigation services, around, different repairs, but it's, we've been very cautious and very careful, considering that we're seeing a little bit mindful right now, which is involved in negotiable.
Sure, I would agree with that. I appreciate that. But, so one thing that I think about, I think this is kind of, in alignment with the job analysis, is that as far as the accounting positions are concerned, right, and then the utilities department, right? So the utilities department is a separate fund balance. So I'm trying to figure out as far as what positions are essential for that department to function appropriately, and then them having a separate fund balance, and that appearing to be fairly healthy. Like, is it necessary for the utility department to be a part of that higher increase, given that they operate, on call and they water management rate right now, that's an additional cost that we need to be prepared to spend for. So should the utility department be included in that? And we're not making the decision today. This is just me
Right.
asking the question.
Right.
Asking the question, hey, is this something that should be there? Because it's pretty clear to me, even though I don't have an exact number, which makes me extremely uncomfortable. I think like everybody else on the board. The utility department doesn't appear to need to be in there, from what I understand.
What about the lawyer fees? I know the lawyer fees has driven up a lot of costs in the township. How are we there with lawyer fees? Because I know,
What I've seen with Mr. Lucas's billing,
I'm not talking about him, for all the lawsuits and all that. Are we okay there?
the lawsuits have driven up our general liability expenses significantly. And that has tacked on the past year about an extra $40,000 on the township. Hopefully, that'll start to taper off. But two, when these three elections, especially the clerk and all, came into our positions in November, decisions have not been made yet around healthcare, around some of these general liability insurance issues. And so there was not enough time for us to shop for the elections, to look at different vendors. And we were stuck with incredible increases in costs.
Because the lawsuits those attorneys are handled through our insurance, so that doesn't go into the attorney fee. I think what happened last year is that when it started, we already needed almost $500,000 to make the year, and then it ended up needing whatever. Right. For general.
I just have a question about finances in general, and maybe some of our previous electeds can speak to this. So is it typically the case that we wouldn't see the fund balance until the middle of the year? So just after the audit is complete?
They're on the balance sheets every month.
No, I understand that, but they're incomplete. So we're saying like the numbers aren't. Do you understand?
They won't. The fund balance, the designated ones. Those don't change. Those are right, but
Right,
undesignated, they won't shift until it's the previous year's close.
Okay. So the undesignated fund balance, so until the previous year is closed, so until the audit is complete, that we won't know what's in the undesignated.
Well, because if you looked at the 12/20 or 12/31/2024, it says that loss.
Yeah.
So that loss will come out of the undesignated, and that number will take that down.
Okay.
Did that answer your question, trustee Kurt?
Yeah, I believe it did. Yeah.
I can, if you want, I can explain it to you.
That'd be great. I know what you're
Sometimes
talking
it's better to visualize. Okay?
Something that I've had on my mind too, since this board has been very thoughtful about the contracts that we're passing, the projects that we're spending on, I'm wondering if we did, lift the hiring freeze, and considering what you're saying about utilities, if moving forward would make more sense to instead institute a policy saying that temporary work needs to be approved by the board moving forward, and then also overtime would either need to be approved by me or approved by the board. And that would really make sure that we're keeping our costs paid.
Yeah.
As an alternative.
Most places overtime is approved or approved in advance. I mean, most places, that's how you do.
Well, utilities,
Right, yeah, it would
they
be
don't
weak
fit in there.
They get
You
caught
can't
in.
control
I
that.
can't control that.
Right, if we have a water main break, of course, they have to go out,
But
but
mine's approved to be here
Yes,
tonight. And then at the township for being here, once I have an election and I needed temporary people,
well, yeah.
we would budget it, we would budget it today. Ahead of time.
Mr. Schwartz?
I agree with Dana that, you know, you could look at utility and say, well, we know as a proprietary fund, and there's a huge fund balance or whatever it is, there would be enough to hire somebody that could be brought to the board. What we're really looking at is the general fund. That's the one that's really in trouble.
That's the general fund.
So
Sorry.
I think we
General
could
fund
make
is
that
fine.
bifurcation.
What, now, do we have anything pending in utilities and
Yes,
do we have to, we need to, what do we have pending in utilities that we're gonna have to come? We gotta have to come up with something for, yeah, that you know.
well, there's the lawsuit, where we sued, we sued and we got countersued, actually, we got countersued, you know, with, LaSalle.
Okay.
So that's something that we should get an update on that, or supervisor maybe already has, and find out where that's at. There's probably gonna be some expenditure out of that, maybe as much as $1 million to settle that loss.
From utility.
From the utility fund. So, you know, when you look at it, you have to take those extended liabilities into consideration when you're making a decision. Again, I don't want to bring somebody on and I shorted myself on having money to pay for that. But I think we probably enough money.
Now, what kind of capital improvements do we have in utilities? What about some of the things on Harvest Lane and Wired Road, those capital improvements?
Well, the last capital improvement, the last board approved, I don't think we approved any here.
What portion is that the 24?
No, in 2024, we approved a water main extension on Stanford.
Yeah, they just went in there, that's they just went in.
Is that done?
Yeah.
It is done, yeah.
Okay.
And how
So-
much was that?
300,000 something.
Yeah, and it was budgeted for, it was.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think that's one
the
major project that was late coming up.
I think it's safe to say the supervisor could add, I think utilities are in a pretty good position now financially. And, you know, the supervisor who is charging utilities thinks that we should maybe hire somebody down there. If there's enough money, in their budget to take care of all the future needs, plus an additional person, then they could bring that forward.
But we don't need any, like, as far as back in capital improvements, we need to, and I know I've been wanting to talk about this, and I'm gonna throw this out here real quick, and we can talk about it some other time. We need to look at some things here, capital improvements, the roof. There's things that needs to be done, money coming from general fund, and we need to look at some things in utility. As far as capital improvements, and we have not discussed this since the new board's come together. So keep those things in mind that we need to discuss those at some date, not late, but real soon for capital improvement.
I'm supportive of this idea of either giving our provision support to look at temp hiring overtime, but also the idea of separating utilities from the conversation and recognizing it is an essential service and they are feeling particularly strapped.
I'm good with that. I'm good with utility tie-in if we have the money.
Right.
Ms. Burton did share that the most pressing time for that to be resolved will be by August.
Well, and if it's a time of the essence issue for utilities, what we could do at the regular board meeting tonight, we could authorize the supervisor to inquire with the director as to what their needs are and then do a quick financial analysis and then give her authority to make the decision to do the hiring.
I'm good with that.
I say one thing, I think in their 2025 budget, they actually already had an additional person in admin and out in the maintenance department, because they were looking out here and one more gentleman or a person, excuse me,
Yeah.
for Ricky's current.
Correct.
So I think that's already part of the budget.
I'm good with that if we have the money for that, so.
You gonna make that motion?
But not
No,
right
we'll
now.
have to do that. Regular meeting. Yeah, I can make that. I can make that. Yeah, go ahead.
What about other positions?
So I was gonna come on it because to your point, Nancy, thank you for the commentary about the feedback. Because the field tech position was already in the budget and it builds. So just, yeah, so I would also consider that position, but I think if we're talking about removing utilities as a whole from the freeze, then that's something that we talked about during the general, board. Like presented to the board.
Do you think we should wait for 2 weeks? Yeah, for the auditor?
You mean in terms of the clarification of their duties, like we were talking about a few minutes ago?
No, it's fine. Hiring.
Oh, free
I
on
think
13.
the way, I mean, I'm good with whatever you guys.
I mean, looking at utilities budget, I feel like they're pretty comfortable. They're comfortable. Even like I don't see the auditors number like changing where utilities is at.
Okay, and we were just talking about general fund budget. Right, Ken, this starts waiting in 2 weeks.
Pardon me, I didn't.
We were talking about just the general fund budget, waiting.
So the end of June.
The hiring.
Well, I think on a general point, we gotta wait a little longer, gotta get to audit, and then I think we should go to 6 months and 1/2, and then we know where we're at for this half, and we can predict what will happen in the second half, and then we can deal with the general fund. But I think that utilities, my suggestion would be, we do a motion tonight, authorizing the supervisor to hire one employee, conduct the recommendation of the director down there. Do the hiring now, because it seems like his time is the essence down there.
No, exactly.
And then, as far as taking the utilities out altogether, we do that if you want at the next board meeting in June. If you guys figure that's appropriate at that time, or just wait, if they get the extra person, it probably won't be so tight.
Yeah. And then we can come up with those job descriptions, as we said, but at the same time, we'll make sure that they have what they need to have their needs met.
But that still leaves the question that was currently a temporary position that's being filled as a retired as the.
Right. So to Ken's point, so I would recommend removing a utility department from the higher freeze. I'll recommend walking out onto the edge of this tonight. And then Madam Supervisor, if you with like consultation of the utilities director, as far as like the tech position and then any additional positions that would free you up to make additional hires if necessary.
That I was going to bring up.
Right.
Yeah, I oppose that only because we don't have any numbers at all that we can make a rational decision whether that's appropriate. This is giving you some limited authority to do one thing based upon only if the money is there. And, you know, we need to have more of a analytical data regarding utilities to remove them. I'm sure we can remove them, you know.
But then can we
But
also,
we shouldn't do it in the blind. We should have something in front of us that says it's appropriate.
and even if one person was hired, can we still though just do another temporary person if that was necessary for their needs to be met?
Well, I would say you bring that back, have the supervisor bring that back.
Okay. I just
Okay,
want to make sure their needs are being met.
You go ahead.
Just so I'm clear, you guys, what are we, this is a working session.
Yep.
Just so I'm clear, what are we voting on? Can you tell me?
Already discussing.
At the regular meeting.
Well, I think she's just trying to get an
What is
understanding.
what the discussion is.
Yeah, we're discussing what to walk on.
Right, if anything.
There's kind of there's two ideas.
Well, if the board is fine with it, you know, you already got one motion you're gonna put out, right?
Yeah, that's for the, putting the proposal together and run by the supervisor.
Okay, and then mine can be authorize the supervisor to hire one utility worker. If not only if she determines that it's financially, we have the financial capacity to do it, and that she has worked with the director to choose the right person.
Okay,
Giving
you're
her
gonna,
a lot of discretion, but we're trying to cut the red
Yeah.
tape so they can hire.
So
you're gonna make that motion.
I'll make that motion.
So my only question related to this is like, so I know that we have a lot of ambiguity when it comes to what our balances look like and how dire our financial situation is for the general fund. Do we have that same level of ambiguity for utilities? I thought we had a pretty decent idea of where they're at.
There's one big issue down there.
Yeah.
They're fine. They
Okay,
have plenty of money to roll.
That's some bucks.
But there's this big liability out there with LaSalle. They're asking for $4 million. Now, if they got a judgment for $4 million, our utilities wiped out. We gotta go bond.
What is their reserve right
Okay.
now? 5 million?
I think it's less than that, but I mean, you have to plan for that LaSalle case to go. You gotta give some weight to that case. In
You
order
know
to
what
make
the
some.
reserve-
Off the top of my head, I get to lose it. You want me to?
I would like to know what is their
that
reserve.
was pretty good. So I guess my question is, utilities has 3 positions, is that right? That we're talking about increasing spending on. So there's field tech, which is already budgeted as a vacant position.
Right.
There's the additional responsibilities that Aaliyah's taking on with Mr. Lockheed's departure. Obviously, we're saving money by not paying Mr. Lockheed. And then we also have the building specialist and residential liaison, which is being currently filled with. Is that it?
But then we have the other 2 on the board.
I think that's
Aaliyah's position is in the board meeting tonight. The building
Correct.
specialist is currently being filled by a temp. And then the tech 2 position was previously approved by the board.
neither of those have to be brought before the board because Mary has authority to hire a temp and she also has authority to fill vacant positions.
Correct, and that's what she has.
Okay.
Right, so-
I just want to make sure I had my understanding correctly.
No, actually, in this case, it's the supervisor. Right now, supervisor's in charge. She could be directly,
Because we reappointed the supervisor.
Oh, okay, I see.
And two,
but I guess I'm asking,
related to the utility department, third is expecting 1 or 2 people from the tech side to be departing soon.
Right,
Yes.
So, and she wants to
That's
train.
correct.
right. So I guess just a little bit of perspective. I'm just curious, like, the amount of money that we're talking about for these positions doesn't seem to make a difference to a $4 million lawsuit. It's like 80 grand.
Yeah.
Like, so we get sued for $4 million. Like, we get
judgment against us.
sure, we get a judgment against us for $4 million, or we get a judgment against us for $3.92 million. Like we still have the same actions that we need to take.
I don't
I
think
think
that's
that's
Okay, that's fine. I'm just trying to understand because that's where my logic.
what requires of all bonding and all sorts of issues that were arising. Hopefully they can get settled for something we can all live with and we can move on, and then it wouldn't make a difference. I think the utility department probably has enough money to cover everything that was anticipated for the future.
And that's kind of my point.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that the ideally, with how far back we had talked about some of these things, we would have had criteria for lifting the hiring freeze tonight. That is one thing that I'd like to figure out why we don't, because we talked about that at the last board meeting of putting some criteria together. And so I was a little surprised that we didn't have supporting documentation in here around, okay, what metrics are we looking at for lifting the hiring freeze? And also, we talked about and submitted the job analysis piece, weeks ago as well. So we haven't moved as swiftly on some of these items. And I guess I am worried about continuing the level of ambiguity and uncertainty that utilities has been enduring if we are talking about 80 grand, and relative to 4 million. I think anything that we decide to bring forward, I will be, delighted, to put my hand up for, because I think whatever we can do to relieve some pressure down there, great. But I'm just curious about, do we really need to elongate the hiring freeze?
So can I piggyback off of that? So yeah, I would second everything that Trustee Devereaux just said. I also am concerned that if we continue to delay, that we may potentially find ourselves in a cascade effect. Where because of the continued ambiguity, right now we have the building specialist and residential liaison position being filled by a temp. I'm concerned about that temp's willingness to say if there isn't clarity. If there isn't clarity put forth on that point, then I'm also concerned with, given the fact that there have been additional responsibilities taken on by the current building specialist and I'm also concerned about what that would look like. So, if anything, I feel like there should be some clarity provided in that space. I think we've kind of been kicking the ball around this for a long time. I think we kind of recognize that utilities is currently in a healthy position. So, Justin, can you?
I agree with you, but I'm not too concerned because it hasn't been that, we haven't been that long without the position in utility. So, and I agree with you, we don't want to go months and months.
But
We don't want to go too long without those positions being filled. So luckily, it hasn't been that long, it's basically without those positions being filled.
So what would the board like to do at our meeting?
Well, I have one question for you on that. Would you prefer this to be that you be authorized to hire a temporary worker and then that you'd have a permanent then later? Or
We can already do that.
But yeah, when didn't you say?
The hiring fee? I thought you had to-
Yeah,
Yeah.
put it in such a.
As long as there was budget, I'm sorry.
Right, yeah.
That's just too station.
So what are you recommending?
Well, I thought we had a hiring freeze. I didn't know that they were still hiring by using the temporary worker to work around the hiring freeze. That seems to defeat the hiring freeze to me. But whatever, I just want to know if on this one, that when we propose the language, do you want it to be a temporary worker or a permanent worker? Right?
And
Because even though, I
and
just
the
want to say
thing
one more
was, that
thing.
Mary Ann also had the autonomy though, if she felt like she still needed a temporary worker, she could still hire a temporary worker though. Well, that's what I thought, yeah.
Right,
okay.
but yeah, and just my understanding is if that position is for the permanent role, that they should know. But she could, yeah.
Yeah, I'm saying, that's what I said from the beginning, she had the autonomy to be able to do
I
both.
disagree that she does not have that.
Okay,
The
well,
supervisor.
along with the
The supervisor.
supervisor of that, in addition to, in conjunction with.
Yeah.
You have April? Okay,
No, this is April?
yeah, just,
Okay.
So I was right about five,
Yes.
but we do have a 2.7 million bond that we pay.
Oh.
We have,
That was three, but three
and
million.
that's on page 2.
What's the bottom line?
Well, the cash is at the top, what we have in cash, 4.4 from the cash.
Okay.
You know, when you hire somebody, it's just not the salary, when you roll everything in and expect somebody to be there for maybe a lifetime, it's more than that.
Yeah, I'm just throwing it out there, not proposing anything, just throwing out a perspective for us to evaluate the situation.
Well, I want to do whatever helps the supervisor best. We need to, so whatever supervisor feels that we need to do. Good for.
I'd like to be able to hire.
We're authorizing you to hire this person, we're trusting your judgment, you hire the right person. You're not bringing it back to the board, this person back to the board.
Understood.
You're hiring.
That's part of your motion, correct?
That's gonna be the motion, yeah, but I just wanna.
This is a supervisor.
So are you, so in that motion, are you making a motion? Are you gonna name a position that we're just giving you a position?
We're giving her authority to make the appropriate decision for hiring and salary at the utility department. Until the hiring freeze is lifted.
And we're not bringing it back to the board, why?
Because we're authorizing her to make all these decisions and hire this person now.
Oh, right now.
Otherwise,
I see what you're
we
saying.
Wait
I
a
see what you're
month.
saying.
we're waiting.
I just wanna make sure we're articulating
So
our
we
reason.
get it done.
So a lot of boards say, I'm not gonna let the supervisor do that, you know, but I think that we can trust our supervisor, who will probably confer with the clerk and the treasurer. on this.
Responsible for utility. Right.
Can we get a break?
Yeah.
I just have one question, as far as, I just have one question, well, suggestion, well, consideration. When you're considering the overtime, I do have a deputy that works on the packet and sometimes it's after hours when we're trying to get things done. So are you saying that I would have to get approval from the board with that? I'm just saying is that, just keep that in mind when you're rewriting things and on the policy book that we
I took that answer, I think you'd be able to just do that on your own authority or hire.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. 'cause that-
Okay, I just wanted to make that clear.
No, I didn't take that down as action, that wasn't something. Said.
No, I just wanted to make that clear. Okay.
Okay. Right, supervisor?
Do we need to officially?
Just announce it.
Can we do it?
She can announce it.
Yeah.
Shall we adjourn? Yeah, so.
Adjourning at 6:46 p.m.
We put it out.
Actually,